Welcome to the UK Scriptwriters podcast. It's me, Danny Stack, with...
me, Tim Clay. Guess where we are, folks?
We're live from Royal Festival Hall in that fancy London.
So you might be able to hear in the background the orchestra warming up. We're not joking. I haven't added it on the soundtrack as a gag. So any sudden bass drums or timpani accompaniment is happening for us as well.
Yes. So this is a special UK Scriptwriters podcast because we're interviewing writer and script editor Andrew Ellard.
Hi, hello.
Welcome to the show, Andrew. Thank you very much for joining us. I've been wanting to interview you for a while, actually.
Well, I'm very fascinated.
Yeah,
so
it's been on the cards. So
yes.
we made the trip special, and we just wanted to talk to you about your career and what's going on, and script editing comedy in particular, which I thought was quite interesting.
Yeah, so for those that don't know Andrew, introduce yourself, mate.
I'm exactly that. I'm a writer and script editor, and I script edit on things like The IT Crowd and Miranda and Cardinal Burns, and in the meantime I'm writing my own stuff and developing my own stuff, and the reason you haven't heard of any of that is because it's all in development and all of that. So where everybody knows me from is either from script editing on shows that you've seen, or from Twitter where I've annoyed you or said something
brilliant,
retweet-worthy.
Brilliant, sounds just like us. And the first time we met was at the Southern Script Festival
down in Bournemouth,
which you came down, gave a talk to, which I don't think we went to because we had our own talk or something at the
Thanks
same
very
time.
Much. Yeah, appreciate it.
But there you go. And but we saw you in the green room after. And funnily enough, the next time that I was aware of your name was when I was at the London Screenwriters Festival, and I went to talk with Graham Linehan, who mentioned you.
Right, yes.
So it was almost like, hey, I know that name. And that was great, you know what I mean? That you kind of, to hear about you and to have met you as well. So mostly comedy is your bag, though.
It seems to be, although it was never a deliberate choice. I was never kind of targeted at comedy. I came out of university absolutely adamant that I was going to be doing drama, that I was going to be writing in a sort of Jimmy McGoverney, because that was who was huge when I was at university, Jimmy McGoverney kind of stuff, and that the way to do that was kind of like how he did, because one of his big... He was on Brookside for a long time before. And you kind of went, oh, okay, and soaps. And the thing about soaps is a career. Soaps, you get a job, you can do more than one episode, you can keep coming back, it's a constant mill. So I thought, well, there you go, that means it's a profession that I can tell my mother about confidently and not feel like it's just pie in the sky. So I was absolutely adamant I was going to be doing EastEnders, Coronation Street, whatever, but I was going to be doing that, and that was everything.
Well, why did you even think that, Andrew? Did you like those shows?
I was certainly I was watching Casualty and I was watching Holby at that point, and I was definitely watching EastEnders. I've dropped basically all my soaps in the last kind of 10 years, but at the time I was into all of them. But it was also that it was clear that in order to get, you needed practice, you needed experience, and you needed to demonstrate your ability somewhere, and you couldn't do that just by keep writing things in and sending them in alone, that getting jobs. And also you had to pay the rent, and it was either get a proper job or be a writer, and I wanted to be a writer. So it looked like a career, it looked like a proper job.
So what was your thinking on comedy at the time? Was it like you loved it, but you never even thought it was possible?
In retrospect, I've realised, back when I was kind of 12, 13, 14, at school, we were kind of taking Monty Python sketches and rewriting them and rewriting them, the arrogance. We didn't know. But
I just think some things haven't changed. But anyway, it's the sort of thing you do now.
And we would get the video camera and get really excited about shooting stuff, and me and a friend of mine used to do 2 Ronnie sketches on the stage at school Christmas concerts and stuff. The Strange Case of Mrs. Mace, which is the one that all rhymes. Morning, Dawning, they usually go to murder. Yes, sir, she was shot in Oldshot by Bagshot with a slingshot full of buckshot. It's all still in there. So I was clearly massively interested in comedy. I loved the reactions it gave you, but then as soon as I was a writer, I somehow went, well, there's funny and then there's writing. Yeah. And I never... And also, I think at the time I hadn't fully appreciated that you could be distinct, that you could be not a performer of comedy and still write comedy.
Yes.
That you kind of figure, and this is, to be fair, this was always deliberate. When they presented the 2 Ronnies to people, when they presented Morecambe and Wise, they presented it as them. It was never them as brought to you by a team of writers.
Yes.
Which still happens now. You look at any of the kind of additional writer credits on the end of shows, and you go, okay, so they're the star, but they didn't. This isn't all their own.
The funny thing is, actually, you go back to those days, even the people that were writing, like especially maybe 2 Ronnies and maybe the more satirical David Frost style radio stuff and all that. Even the writers were also well-known performers.
Yeah.
And they'd come in and helped, but you still knew those names. You know what I mean? In their own right.
And to be fair, there's no denying. And I always think I'm going to lack for this. There is no question. If you are somebody who takes material yourself and delivers it to an audience and overcome all the fear it takes to do that, you're at an advantage because you've tested material. You know that certain things would. Obviously, you hear about stand-up all the time who think they've got a killer thing, and then they go out and do it, and the bit just doesn't fly at all for some reason. And you can't. And you go like, I've written it this 14 ways, and for some reason this joke never, ever, ever lands.
Yeah.
But apart from that, generally speaking, those guys develop such a good instinct for what will hit and what will miss, and that's invaluable to write, even in the writing process.
I'm jumping ahead here a bit, Andrew, but even then, while you were growing up, were you even then deconstructing comedy and how it worked? Do you think?
I think
because that's something you do obviously regularly now.
I genuinely, I guess we'll talk about this a little bit, but I had no idea script editor was a job. I had no idea that deconstructing. It's just in my nature to be kind of pragmatically analytical, and I've always been kind of able to detach. You see it a lot when I do tweet notes about things. Sometimes I'll do a set of tweet notes about a movie, and people will come back, hang on, so did you like it or not like it? And it's like, well, I'm not talking about that. That's my taste. My taste is a separate thing from whether when you put a machine together and it functions, either it functions or it doesn't. Either it makes...
As it was designed to do.
Absolutely.
So you're looking at what were your best notes, and you at your best is looking at what is it that those guys want to do with this story, and why is there inefficiencies in here? Let me help you get that better.
I think one of the reasons I'm not too bad at the job that I do is because when I read a script, I always say my job is to get you to the best version of the thing you're already trying to write. What it isn't is to turn up and tell you what this should be, and that's a different thing. And so when a script comes to me, giving notes is one thing, but before you give notes, you have to get what they're trying to say with the thing that they've already written. Oh, you're trying to get a laugh out of this. You're trying to get this kind of personality across. You're trying to have this kind of tone where this kind of specific thing can happen, and we'll believe it because of the tone of the rest of it. All of that is about understanding, it's about comprehending, and it's about being on the side of the writer. So when I go and see a movie, when I see a TV show, it's all the same thing. I've always had this kind of separation of, on the one hand, it's whether I liked it or not, whether it was for me or not, and then separately from that, this thing of, but is it what they were trying to do? Because if it achieves what they were trying to do, Richard Curtis gave an interview ages ago, and I'm not a big fan of his recent movies, but he said, well, no, but my stuff, these rom-coms and this tone, things are for the people who like them. Like, if you don't like horror movies, you can't make the horror movie. What's the point of trying to... If you're the kind of person who's cynical about London, who's cynical about... Of course Richard Curtis comedies... His job isn't to try and please the people who were never going to like it in the first place. His job is to work for the audience that are going to love it. Now, that shouldn't mean you become jaded. That shouldn't mean that you allow yourself to get away with stuff, because what does it matter? Because the people who like me will like me, because otherwise you end up like Kevin Smith. But the ultimate realisation that you don't have to write for everyone, you just have to write for the people who like this kind of thing. I think that's good. I think that's useful and helpful, and part of my job as a script editor is to be that guy, at least as far as you're concerned.
Getting into the world of comedy then, Andrew, to rewind, would it be fair to say then that was Red Dwarf for you?
Kind of.
Tell us how you broke in.
Red Dwarf's complicated because I was a fan of that show, and I want to be clear, I was a fan who went to a convention dressed up and won second prize in 1993 dressed as Arnold Rimmer. Circus Series 2.
Oh my God.
You've got to pick your... And to be honest, it was a terrible costume, but I was thin at the time, and I had a performance. I was able to do the Chris Barry face stuff. So it was a worthy runner.
All you need is that and the H, and you're there.
I came runner-up to a toaster, though, so you can't look at it too. Anyway, but I was a fan of that show. I was in deep to that, and then separately went to university. Blah blah blah. Finished university, was milling around, trying desperately, signing on, and not knowing quite what to do with myself. And Grant Naylor, the production company behind Red Dwarf, dropped me a line because I'd been editing the Fan Club magazine and writing, and I'd interviewed. In fact, I'd interviewed a writer. I'd interviewed Paul Alexander, who's now a mate. For that, and they I think they heard good things about that, and they'd read the first issue that I edited, and they got in touch and said, we're setting up the Red Dwarf website properly. We want it to have news, reviews, features, proper articles, some comedy stuff, blah, blah, blah. And we need a writer for all of that who knows the show backwards, and real writers are too expensive, and you're a postgrad, so do you want to come in and do that? And that's how I got. So I was in the Grant Naylor production office, and I can't tell you, everyone asks for, how did you break in advice? You didn't break in, but what did happen was I got a job in the production office doing stuff that nobody dreams of doing, except that I was a fan of Red Dwarf, so I was happy to be around it, but never meet your idols and all of that.
Yeah.
But it meant I was in the room. So when we started doing the Red Dwarf DVDs, I'd already kind of done directing and stuff at university, but it meant I could direct the documentaries for the DVDs.
Behind the scenes.
Yeah. You start to become useful as in a very low level, a version of production.
Yeah.
Separately from that, Doug Naylor was writing the Red Dwarf feature film at the time, and he sent me a draft just to kind of get a fan's perspective on it, and I sent him notes, and tentatively, because you don't want to kind of slag anybody's work, well, that's a bit... And he sent me a thing back going, these are the best notes I've ever had. And it's like, no, this is just what I think. It's not... So then I sent him a second set of notes that were the unvarnished version of what I sent the first time, with like, and here's the stuff I didn't really want to say, but oh my God, these are so useful. Next thing I know, he's recommended me to Paul Jackson.
Right.
BBC producer, is that right?
He was, at that point, he was at ITV. By the time that happened, so that's 2007, 2008, something like that. So the movie had rolled through various iterations and whatever. So the timeline for this is very, very, very messy. But the short version is, I didn't know that giving notes was a thing that people considered valuable and useful, and Doug made me realise that was absolutely the case.
That, in a sense, was your first script editing gig.
Definitely.
But it wasn't, if you see what I mean. There wasn't a gig, it wasn't a thing, it was just...
Proving
you did it.
And this is one of the things I say when people ask me about, where to go and how to get started. Be useful to people. One of those things.
Get involved and be useful.
Just and obviously I managed to get the ear of a guy who created a franchise I adore. That's unusual. No one else is going to be able to follow that exact trajectory. But nobody wants notes anyway. Nobody wants notes. Notes are a horrible. Scripts are a horrible document anyway. Scripts are.
Nobody wants to read a script.
Nobody wants to read it. They're terrible anyway. Books you want to read because at least they're designed to put the imagery in your brain. Scripts are designed to get the imagery onto a screen. They're to tell you how to shoot it as much as how to... They're intermediary steps. No architect shows off his blueprints. He shows off the building. And you, as a writer, what you want to show is the finished film, the finished... They're not nice documents. No. And then on top of that, having slaved to try and produce one, nobody wants an email that turns up with 12 pages of, but that doesn't really work. One of the things about me is I try and make it that you want my notes, that they're actually considered valuable, that you go on and want to do the rewrites based on.
That's a good approach for a script editor.
Inspiring.
You want nothing better than when I finish the phone call, finish the note, get the email back, whatever, and they go, "Oh, I know how to do that. I know what to do with that. That's a great. I know." And it's not that I've given them the 5 ideas to go and add, but you've just opened up a whole load of directions they didn't know were there, and now they know are there. They can't wait to explore. It's like having the next section of a map in a video game.
Well, what I've taken already from what you've said is that the added value of doing something that you love is so powerful because you do it with energy, you do it with love, and you do it. You know what I mean? Though you want to do it. It's not a job, and so actually your best work is on things that you enjoy doing. So why fight that?
Well, I'm an opinionated idiot. I mean, this is the thing. I can't not leak opinions out. This is why I'm on Twitter. Is because at least I've got.
But you come across as shy and introverted.
But
you've taken it to speak here.
But you've turned that into a strength, Andrew. That's what I mean. You've not that you've had a big reflection and thought, what am I good at? But what you've done is you've realised when you're on the right track with something and carried on with it.
Honestly, the thing I do on Twitter, the tweet notes, I would be doing 5 of them a week if I wasn't a script editor, because I've got to put it somewhere. It's going to leak out of my head one way or the other.
Well, so I'm going to get to them in a bit, because I really like the tweet notes. But the Red Dwarf thing, that wasn't a eureka of like, script editor, that's what I am now.
No.
It was just like, that was just your first taste, really.
Very kind of a taste of it. And then Paul Jackson, I was looking to kind of move on from Grant Naylor. I'd been there for 8 years, and you can kind of feel like it's the time.
I didn't realise you were there.
No, long time. And we made all of those DVDs. I mean, a massive. The documentaries alone, I'm really proud of, because no TV show has very few TV shows have huge, massive, in-depth, candid documentaries about the making of them, albeit retrospective. It doesn't happen a lot. Anyway, having got towards the end of that, Doug recommended me to Paul Jackson, and Paul Jackson, they'd got a show in production called Honest, which is really interesting.
Remember Honest.
Yeah. And about
Greenlit Productions.
Yeah, that's right. And it's a criminal family trying to go straight. Written Jack and Harry Williams, who are terrific and are now flying so very high.
Is that The Missing Guys?
That's The Missing Guys. And they gave me, I think, episode 4. They'd had the first 3 and they'd already started shooting, and then they were going to have a break in filming and the other 3 scripts and blah, blah. And so they sent me episode 4, and I sent notes back, and ITV, so it's Paul Jackson and Michaela Hennessy-Vass, who were in charge of comedy at that point, just went, can we get you to look at everything? And what happened was I became like a free gift with purchase. If you got your show greenlit at ITV, your comedy greenlit at ITV, more likely than not, Paul and Michaela would put me on your case. And not to be the channel notes, because nobody wants channel notes, same thing. They come through and they say, yeah, but can it have a dog? And you just go, well, Instead of that, what you got was me, and I come across as the script editor who's on your side. I'm the one who wants you to make the show you want to make. I'm not here to tell you what ITV want it to be. So you get pragmatic notes, but you get notes also that are take them or leave them. They're not dictatorial. They were never, you must fill Andrew's tick box list of things. But look, here's 20 things about the script that you've delivered. Useful hope stuff. And so I started just kind of working on cool things. Jonathan Harvey had a thing going on. Caroline Aherne had Fattest Man in Britain. There was all these kind of... It was such a short-lived period of ITV comedy, but there was a lot of really cool...
2004? 5?
Oh, later, 2007, 8.
Oh, wow, that later.
Yeah, much more recent. I've not been doing that this long, relatively.
Right, okay.
2008, 2009, something like that. And so it was just this very short period where all of a sudden Guy Jenkin, and like these are people I've idolised growing up, these writers, and all of a sudden, and you have to be, and I have to say, actually from a learning point of view, being put in a room with a series of your idols, you slowly, when I first went into those read-throughs, I would sit next to the continuity guy, I would sit next to the person with the stopwatch timing the script, because I didn't want to be anywhere near where the power was. I didn't want to be near where the talent was, because those people are scary, they're intimidating, they're famous, and I didn't want to be, so I hid. Because I was naturally, at that point in particular, I was a very shy person. When I first started at Grant Naylor, I couldn't make phone calls. I was so anxious. Because you have to phone agents to get interviews with actors. I didn't want to phone agents. I would fax. This was pre-ubiquitous email, right, in 2000. So I would send faxes to agents in the hopes that would get them to reply, because at least that way I didn't have to speak to anyone. You got to get over that hurdle, because telly and film, whatever, it requires you to come in and sell yourself. There's no getting around it. You've got to have enough about you to stick it forward, and the page won't speak for itself.
No,
you've got to do the rest. So that was such a good training ground for me. For number one, telling truth to power. That line from The West Wing, telling truth to power. Giving notes to people who you worship and idolise, but letting them know, I'm sorry, actually though, but it doesn't work. People who criticise my work usually are people who don't know what I actually do.
Yeah.
And a lot of that comes from, I didn't like the final show, so I don't like his script editing. It's like, you don't know which of my notes were taken on board and which ones weren't. And it's very hard to place the blame for things. I try very hard when I talk about movies not to blame the writer or the director or because you don't know where that came in the process and why it's still in there. And you can say it doesn't work, just don't say it's somebody's fault unless you're really sure.
Neither can you claim credit, though.
And that's the hard thing.
It's like, if it's a success, great, you've been part of it, but if it's failed, it's like,
it's very, very tough. But you want to... I think people think that because I've worked for so many people that I idolise, I must idolise them when I send the notes. And if anything, the reverse is true. You know how Doctor Who fans are the hardest on the show. I'm the hardest on, and it's not... It's not about... What I don't do is say, well, this show doesn't work, what's the point of this? Because, they think it works, and we've got it. But whether the format needs fixing, whether the tone, whether the storytelling doesn't fit, all of these things, everything's up for grabs. And they want you, they hire you, not because you'll fawn to them. There's a lot in the business now who consider... There's a lot of people in the business who consider the script editor to be an optional extra, a luxury, because you're going to get 6 scripts either way. If you don't have a script editor, you'll still have 6 half hours to shoot. And it's short-sighted, obviously, because then you've got 6.5 hours that don't work as well because they haven't been interrogated as hard, which means that ultimately you don't get a second series. So you're playing with your... I did hear somebody say, well, what do we need a script editor for? We want to spend the money on the show. And it's like... so bizarre.
Spend the money on the show.
On the show.
Have you ever had a case, though, where you're being pragmatic there and saying, you want to help them make the best show that they want to make? Have you ever really, and obviously don't name names, no you wouldn't anyway, but have you ever been put into a corner where you felt, I don't really know what this show is trying to do, or I actually do feel that this is pretty much going to be a dead end because there's not enough potential in that idea?
I very rarely, because if it's very rare that anything gets all the way to production and there isn't enough in the tank. But whether I like it is something completely different. And certainly I've worked on things where, they weren't if a thing wasn't very good and I made it mediocre, if I took it all the way up to mediocre, I'm proud of myself just for getting it that far, because you do have to pay the bills. You don't do this just for the art and the love. There's also a job to think about. On the other hand, my taste isn't necessarily relevant to any of this process. As I say, that pragmatism. There's a sketch in Cardinal Burns called Vomit Cops, and it's two cops turn up a crime scene. It's all very kind of dark and moody, and Seven or CSI or whatever. And they turn up with the long coats and they look at the corpse on the floor, and the cop starts to try and describe the scene and vomits on the corpse. And then the other one tries to help him summarise the situation and vomits on the corpse. And then the other guy vomits again, and then they vomit on the wall, and then they vomit. I don't like vomit jokes. I don't like vomiting for some reason. I don't intrinsically find much fun in it, and it's weird. I'm the guy who likes Mr. Creosote when he explodes, but I'm not a fan of the puking at all. Doesn't remotely matter. I script edited that sketch in exactly the same way as you would script edit anything else. Is the timing right? Do we get the premise? Are we clear on the thing? Are the beats right? It doesn't have to be I love Cardinal Burns. Everything else that they've done, that one sketch just wasn't to my taste. My taste is completely irrelevant to making it work to the best it can.
Because that might be some people's favourite.
Absolutely, and it is. I mean, that one went a bit viral. That one, and it was, and it's. Because you know about rhythms, you know about comedy rhythms, you know about timing, you know about clarity. So much about sketch comedy is buy the premise really quickly, grasp the truth of the situation and what's going on. So, when there's blood smeared on the walls, it has to look real. We had a great director on Cardinal Burns, Ben Taylor, and he always knows whether to go for something big and silly or whether to play it, quiet and real. And this one was played exactly the right tone, exactly the right super serious detective show tone. And that's the thing, is that's what it needs, regardless of whether or not you like the vomit joke that goes with it.
What we were joshing around beforehand. And you were saying people think the script editor's that gag writer. So you brought in to write gags. Now, obviously, already we know that not to be true from what you've said.
Because I haven't been funny once.
Because you haven't been funny once. And you've never talked about adding a gag in. But in fact, and you say that that's something maybe some of the listeners might think you do. Is it actually something that some industry
it does. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it does happen. But although nobody tends to think of me, because I tend to get my work on recommendation. People hear about you and what you've done for something else, and they go, well, we could really use that here. And if what you're missing is jokes, nobody thinks to phone Andrew. They know it's for character, they know it's for format, they know it's for structure, they know he's not funny.
Right.
By the way, I'm trying to write several sitcoms at the moment, so let's not let that stand as unchallenged.
You're digging your own grave.
I know, just letting you do what you want there. No, just call it satire, it's fine.
But there is a thing where the script editor title means different things depending on what show you work on. If you do, I always say it's the conduit, the contributor, and the consultant. And the contributor is, well, he wrote a lot of jokes. He or she wrote a lot of jokes on this show, but we don't want to give them a writer credit. Can we give them a script editor credit? Is that okay? Or they'll just come and do a punch up, right? And often you will get a script. Often in sitcoms, often in sketch shows.
Yeah.
If you want to be what I call the conduit, I mean that's for kind of soaps. If you're working on a series that's going to keep going and going and going, although you kind of see it with things like Doctor Who as well, where there's a lot of writers to deal with. So much of this is getting the drafts in on time, getting them up to the right people, getting their feedback as well as your feedback, and feeding all of that stuff. So you have to That's conduiting all of this stuff back. And then the writer says, well, I don't want to do that, but I do want to do this, and I'm interested in that. And they say, well, I'm not sure if the exec's going to like that. Hang on. You have to pass it back upwards. It's partly an admin job, and I don't mean to denigrate that version of script editing at all. But it is so logistical, and on soaps,
and political,
and a lot of it boils down to just stupid things like, well, the actor's going to be away that week, so that episode that you'd written, and that thing, well, we've changed the storyline completely. So hello, the writer, you thought you delivered your final draft, we're doing it all again, and so much of that is about nurturing. There's a lot more kind of almost babysitting that goes on with that job to make the writer feel that they're not completely worthless, because it's not their show. They don't have a say over what the final product is. So it's only about getting the best out of them. So there's that conduity role, and I don't do that either. And in fact, a couple of times I've been asked to do it, or hired people thinking I will do it, and I've kind of had to back away from it. No. I mean, either don't hire me at all, or or
that's of your own understanding of the process, though, really, isn't it, Andrew? I think because other people would just think, well, that's what we need, that's what we want.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, like I say, you get jobs on recommendation, so you hope that people know that you're not a conduity script editor. Because my job is the consultant, more often than not, a consultant script editor, like I think of myself as. You're giving notes directly to the writer. You're giving notes directly to the person in charge. You're not funneling through producers in that direction. You're hopefully just getting them to the best version of the thing they're trying to write, and everything else is extraneous. I'm almost just feedback. I'm almost just opinion, which makes it sound much less of a job than it actually is.
Yeah, but you're focused. That's what you're saying.
Absolutely. I have a particular
creative collaboration.
I would be terrible at collating 12 different people's notes and sending them to the writer and saying, well, this guy says this guy says this producer said this director said, but she's probably got the right idea and he's got the right idea. So,
I know some script editors who collate all of that with their own, so to present it as their own voice, as their own, which actually is a good thing, rather than like this thing here.
Well, you don't want it to feel like it's just it's delivered with distance, with, well, they say that, but we won't have to do that. No, because you're going to have to answer for that at some point, and either it looks like the writer didn't listen to the note because the script editor gave it to them in a way that was ignorable. Oh, no. But it's just not what I do. It's just not what I do.
Okay. Well, I want to bring up the IT crowd.
Yes.
Because I think you getting into that was Series 2? Not Series 1.
Series 4.
Series 4, okay.
I came in at the arse end of that.
Tell us how you got into that, though.
That's my favourite story. That's my favourite telly story, which is, it's kind of the dream thing again. You know how getting involved with Red Dwarf, I'd been doing fan magazine stuff, and then all of a sudden I'm in the office. With the IT crowd, I had written for a blog, not my blog, for a site that several of us all contributed things to, and it was a very disparate thing. It was called Noise to Signal. It's still there as an archive. But we decided, we'll write reviews of Series 3 of the IT crowd, and we took 2 on a piece. And right at the end of the series, Graham contacted and said, Christ, I wish I'd had these reviews earlier, because...
Well, let me just say, they're not just reviews. They're proper
breakdown
essays of...
Yeah. Let's say yes. I'm going to agree with brilliant.
I've just read one of them, and it's like, oh my God, that was amazing.
Right. So all I could stomach was one, and then after that, because they do go on.
This is it, yeah. But Graham obviously saw them.
He saw them in what he found that they were very pragmatic, that they weren't about... I don't like this, and I don't like this, and and therefore this is
3 stars.
The worst thing you can do. You get people on
one thumb up.
Again, when I do the tweet notes, and people come back with, well, okay, but it was shit. Well, no, that's so subjective. I can't do anything with that. It was shit for you, and it isn't for me. So we're at an impasse. All you've done is made your voice heard as loud as mine was. But I was trying to talk about analysis and why things work and thing, and you're just like, no, but I have an opinion. These reviews weren't that. They weren't just, I have an opinion and, this thing to my taste, this thing isn't. It was about, okay, so he tried to do this, the show tried to do this, and it didn't quite come off, and here's why.
Graham was directing these.
He was directing as well.
All of them? Not all of them, surely.
Pretty much, yeah. I mean,
this is Graham Linehan, who's like obviously Father Ted and Black Books and all the things you love.
And Graham sent us this email, and I said, well, look, hang on, if you've got my email address, that means you've been on my website, which means you know what I do for a living. You can have these reviews in advance of making the show if you want. And he said, well, sure. He says, I mean, you say that, but, there's a lot of difference between writing an online review and doing notes before the fact. And I said, I know, it's what I do. Try me out. And he sent me, bless him, like a 7-page beginning of an episode, which has never been made. It was an episode he was going to do. I think there was bits about kind of Moss and Roy end up babysitting by mistake. It was it was really good, but it was 7 pages. It was just getting rolling, and it's like, I don't know where you're planning to take this, but here's where you've left dangling threads, and here's a thing you've set up that could be interesting, and this is the thing. I don't buy this setup. I don't think, but this with the, and he just came back going, oh right, Art, you do know how to do this. We'll hire you. And that was it. I was hired on Series 4 of the IT Crowd, but more importantly, he started recommending me. He started pointing out, the more we worked together, the more notes he got, the happier he was. And in fact, there was a thing with IT Crowd 4 where I was just hired for 1 set of notes on each script. And then when we did that, it was like the money's run out. And then they found more money because they wanted more feedback. And that's kind of like, well, then I must be useful. Yeah. You don't pay more if you can avoid it. And that was it. I was much... It's first that Doug Naylor thing, and then the Paul Jackson thing, which meant that I had a website that said I'd worked on several things, and then it's that which gives me kudos enough so that when Graham came calling, it looked like I was legitimate rather than just a guy who was blogging.
Yeah. Well, I remember.
But again, it's because it was you did the blog review / in-depth analysis. Sorry for all the kids, folks. They're going in for a concert, I think.
They're all mine.
You did.
It's been a hell of a year.
They've come to see you, Andrew. So Andrew's going to do a talk in front of 10,000 kids in a minute. No, you did both. You did that as well. Those blog review breakdowns again because you love the IT Crowd. I'm assuming.
Yeah.
So you've said it's not of your taste. However, you probably got more passion behind something if it is of your taste.
Yeah, that's probably true. And it's one. I think probably it's why, because I always feel like I've been typecast as a comedy script editor, which is. I've been doing. It's weird people pull you into sketches because sketches are a very different form, rather than being pulled into drama, which is closer to what sitcom is than sketches are. The target of laughs is the same.
And would you still be into? You'd still love to do a drama?
I'd love to do it. I mean, I'm doing some comedy drama stuff at the moment, and actually that's
a bridge, man.
But that's the thing is you feel like a bit typecast. But I realise that part of the reason I've been quote unquote typecast is because more than anything I love sitcom. Sitcom's my favourite form of telly. It is the most interesting. It's by far the hardest.
It is the hardest. It's worth reiterating. People don't realise how hard it is.
Yeah.
In terms of the plot it needs.
You do if you've ever tried to do one.
Yeah.
I tried to write one. It was awful. I gave up because I just knew I couldn't do it.
You know what? You end up writing riffs. Oh look, here's three analogues for friends of mine all riffing. Isn't that funny? No, because the story hasn't happened. It's been 12 pages. They just keep talking. It's one of the things I get a lot. Actually, there's always kind of like a little. It's not even a checklist because there's nothing mechanical about what I do. But a lot of you start to see the same tropes in scripts as they come to you over and over and over again. One of them is passive leads, is main characters who do nothing, and people think sitcom is. The people who've written those think sitcom seems to be a series of unfortunate incidents that befall a character. And you look at I get why that happens. You look at The Office, you look at Fawlty Towers. Look at the series of unfortunate things that befall Basil. But here's the thing.
And sorry, just to bring it in, like even Seinfeld or Curb Your Enthusiasm would seem to back that
absolutely.
Up as well.
You pull those shows apart, and what you realise is the characters are the cause of all the problems. They are absolutely the reasons for their own downfall. If only he wasn't Larry David, this situation would resolve itself in 1/10 of the time. But he can't let things go. Basil can't let things go.
That's right.
Jerry and George definitely can't let things go. David Brent can't let things go. Characters who get hooked on a thing and have flaws and problems and bring those flaws and problems. It's like all Basil has to do. What he wants is a quiet life. All he wants is a quiet life. He wants to sit and read the paper. He wants to make the occasional bet. And he wants the hotel to be nice. And he's got a bit of a snobby side. But that's about it. But the problem is, when somebody comes through his door with their shirt open, he hates them. He's decided he hates them before we've even started. So the snide comments start. Then he starts getting obsequious to the people who seem to be of the gentry. And of course, the gentry can't be trusted. And then the working class people aren't actually perfectly nice and reasonable. But because Basil can't just treat everyone fairly, nicely, the same... Today is going to go badly. He can't let those things go. He's his own worst enemy, and so you get these passive sitcom scripts through, and that is so often the problem. It's just that, oh no, look at the 12 funny things that happened to this guy. I don't really care because that could be literally.
This is worth a jingle, right?
Oh yeah.
Andrew Ellard's top tips for sitcom.
Top 5.
Top 5.
Is it going to be 5?
I don't know. Let's find out.
All right.
Number 1. Passive protagonist.
Passive protagonist.
But what I say to students in terms of sitcom as a form is like they generally, classically, work around the world's worst character.
Yeah.
Like Basil Fawlty is the world's worst hotel
We do
manager.
like monsters. We do like monsters. And actually there's an interesting distinction there. We like monsters in British sitcom more than American sitcoms tend to like monsters. You look at the difference between Michael Scott and David Brent, you can see a really clear thing that Michael Scott's a lot sweeter. He's a lot less damaged, and certainly a lot less damaging. Or at least in his intent, like genuinely, David Brent will sabotage you. He will absolutely go, and that's good. Characters who cause those kind of things. Here's a top bloody tip.
Number 2:
don't write the first scene of your sitcom with the character where the alarm goes off and they're tired and they struggle with the alarm and they hit the alarm.
Oh god, that goes for every script.
Yeah,
right? Because the one thing you know for sure is that happens to everybody. You've told me literally nothing about that character other than his waking up is a problem. The only slightly interesting way to do that is if the alarm goes up, the character smacks the alarm and bounds out of bed.
Yeah.
Now I know who that guy is, because that guy's somehow very keen to see life happen.
Yeah.
And what the hell's wrong with that?
Who's this weirdo?
Yeah. That tells you something. Opening with character... One of the things you'll have seen me do on Twitter, I think, is 7 lines from Friends.
Oh yeah, I remember that.
This breakdown of the first 7 lines of the
from
first
the pilot
episode.
Yeah.
It's the most extraordinary job in the world. 4 characters are introduced and you know who they are. You get that Chandler has self-esteem issues. You get that Joey is overconfident. You get that Monica has a preciseness and a particularness. And you get that Phoebe's life is kind of bonkers and weird and out of kilter, and that she's not necessarily in tune with the rest of the conversation, but she's responding to it nonetheless. You get that in 7 lines, and you get what their relationships are. That Chandler is sort of in charge of Joey, that one of them has to be the grown-up, so it's like taking your kid out to the store. In 7 lines, and 5 of those lines are jokes.
Yeah.
It's the most amazing job you'll ever see. I will die before I write anything so good. It is precision made in a way almost nothing is so perfectly tuned. That's how you start your sitcom, is you tell me who everybody is, but you boil it down hard and fast, which means that the next thing you can do is start the plot. Here's top tip number 3.
Number 2 is be sharp.
Premise pilots. I bloody hate
pilots.
I hate premise pilots, and sometimes you have to do them. Sometimes it's required. Sometimes you've got to show a concept that's so big you need the full half hour just to lay the pipe.
Yeah.
But here's the thing. The number of people who write half-hour pilots of sitcoms about how the characters meet and get together. So at the end, the final minute of your first episode is kind of like how the rest of the shows will be. The one thing you can guarantee is the first 28 minutes are atypical.
Yeah.
What you've done is present a script that no other episode of the show will ever be like.
Yes.
That's bonkers.
Does that happen a lot? Because and does it happen on the shows that we don't see? Because it does. You don't need it. So what I mean is, obviously, let's just take Fawlty Towers. Obviously, you're not interested in how he got the hotel or anything. You just start, and the fact he's been there for years, and the same with the IT crowd. You're thinking those 2 fellas have been down in that basement for 10 years, and that's all. That's what you need to know.
Well, and here I need to draw a very particular distinction, because when I talk about premise pilots, technically, the Friends pilot is a premise pilot because Rachel arrives in a wedding dress. Yeah. And technically, the IT Crowd pilot is a premise pilot because Jen shows up in the basement. Yeah. But the important thing is, the rest of it is already there. Yeah. So it's not so much, here's the entire premise, because the entire premise isn't, we were 2 guys in a basement and now there's a woman. Yeah. That's not the premise of the IT Crowd. She belongs there. She just doesn't know she belongs there. So, but what you get is, today's the day the sitcom starts. Yeah. This is why it didn't start yesterday. Jen wasn't there yet. Yeah. And I know that seems like splitting hairs. I know that feels like, but driving a half hour to be about just getting everyone together versus. It's Martin's dad moving in with Frasier. He's already at the radio station. He's already got a brother.
Yes.
But it adds one more thing, which brings Daphne with it and all the rest of it. And sometimes meeting Rachel's perfect, because Rachel arrives and it makes Ross go, love story. And you go, that's why, because one quarter of Friends right now is that love story that's going to keep running and running and running.
I mean, you're still introducing characters, but as you say, it is pretty much what you're going to see every week.
Yeah, absolutely. And the quicker you can bed them in, the quicker you can sit them down and make them work and make them do the job and be part of the show. Like I say, this thing of, well, I don't want to be, I'm not going to be, I shan't, I won't join, I can probably get a job somewhere else, and then at the end of the episode, all right, I guess I'm stuck here. No, decide that you're stuck here in minute 6. That way, it's why the show started today, but the rest of the episode is still a pretty typical episode.
Yeah,
I mean, always say, top tip number 4.
Number 4.
Sitcoms don't usually have a first act. They don't have much of a first act because they don't need them. Most TV drama, actually, generally speaking, what you do is you just want to remind people, hey, so you remember this situation, you remember these characters, you remember that she's a vegetarian. Right, off we go. Because the vegetarianism is going to be the thing that drives the narrative for the next 20 minutes.
Do you even... I mean, I'm surprised that you talk about first act, because it seems to me that the sitcom is not normally a 3-act sort of structure. Do you follow that?
Oh, I think it is. I generally think it is.
We had a big structure debate last time, me and...
I think
3 acts like a bit like... not that helpful to people, but do you still use it?
What I think is, I think it's a shared vernacular, and I think the problem with it is that things aren't 3 acts. Generally speaking, when you talk about the 3-act structure, you're actually talking about 4 quarters, because the second act is twice as big as the first and third acts, and it has a midpoint. So we should be talking about the first, second, and fourth acts just for clarity, but we don't, because then people start talking about a 4-act structure, by which they mean something completely different. The talking, the vernacular, the vocabulary we've given this thing is actually really hurting how we talk about it, and it's making it harder to talk about scripts. That language is as much getting in the way as it's helping us to communicate. Having said that, you want an inciting incident. You want the thing where the letter arrives and it's like, my grandmother's left me $4,000. If only I can get to there in time, but the train will never run. And then the series of obstacles, and then with a bit of luck, you hit a nice midpoint. And if you're on a commercial channel, that's where your commercial break is. And if you're not, it isn't. But you hit a nice midpoint where just going after the money, you can't do a whole 20 minutes on just journeying towards the money. So you have to have something else going on, and you have to. But why does he need the money, and why is it important? And isn't the thing he learns on this journey going to be ultimately more important than just going after the money? And you start hitting that in the middle where stakes get bigger, things get harder, the train stops running, the crisis. Now you've got to pick between that and your mother's heart operation.
So in a way, to summarise or reflect back on what you're saying is, yes, you do use...
Sorry, that was the short answer,
You do use all those structural techniques that we might talk about with a feature or a drama. You're on it, you're like, does this still needs that same structure, same drive, obstacles, midpoint, darkest hour.
You don't hold anybody to it. That's the only thing, is you never treat these things. And the worst thing about all of these writing books, and I do sort of swear by some of them, by which I mean I swear by the ones that suit me
at the time.
And the thing is, they all say roughly the same things. They all say have a protagonist that's actually trying to do stuff. They all say basically things have got to change and escalate and move. What they don't, they always have a nice good low point where everything seems desperate, so that your finale seems bigger. That's just common sense stuff. The problem is, and I recommend Save the Cat to people just because it's short.
Yeah.
And the quickie beats, the basic structural beats are more or less sound, although all this stuff about, make sure you state your theme, and you see all of a sudden characters are saying things they wouldn't say just to get the thing. Shut up. You'll find that stuff. But knowing first quarter, second, third quarter, fourth quarter, knowing that you could use a low point, knowing that you want a good rousing finale, knowing that you need a midpoint where things turn, these are good things to know. But when you send me a script, the last thing I'm doing is looking at the tick box and going, you don't have a midpoint, you see. You lack a midpoint.
Yeah, it's story by numbers, isn't it?
You don't want to do that. You don't want to do that.
But if you feel in your gut something's wrong, you might be dipping into advice.
Here's this
like
point
that.
where it seems like we're doing the same scene 4 times, and you realise, the story hasn't moved on.
Yeah.
If you'd have had a midpoint where something had really changed, I wouldn't be bored right now. So if what you want to do is continue this thread, you've got to give me something else that's interesting to balance this lack of interest I've got going on. There's here. This isn't a top tip. This is a top anecdote, lengthy story thing.
Don't do jingle.
I wasn't doing a jingle.
I'm actually slightly disappointed by the lack of jingle.
All right, tangential anecdote.
There we go. That's better. So I worked on an episode of the Caroline Quentin sitcom Life of Riley for Georgia Pritchett. Georgia is great. That show never quite functioned the way it should, but Georgia's a terrific writer. But what she'd come up with was, as a B story, the kids of the family get hold of the school snake and are looking after it over the half term or whatever it is, and they get hold of it, and the snake gets loose. And you go, well, there you go. That's the break from Act 1 into Act 2. The snake gets loose, and she says, and so they'll look for the snake and they'll hunt for the snake and they'll try and find the snake, and at the end they'll find the snake. And we kind of looked at each other. Oh, that's not a story yet. That's not a story, and it's because it's not really about anything. It's just the same sketch over and over again. We're going to come back to the house, and the kids will be looking for it in a different funny way. And the thing is, she'll find 50 great jokes to do about it, but you'll feel that lack of inertia. Yeah. You will feel that you will feel that it is inert. Yeah. And you start going, well, what can we make? And in our case, what we said was, well, isn't it a thing about fear, about who's scared and why they're scared and how they get over it? Because a kid refusing to get involved with this, then deciding to try because his masculinity has been questioned because the sister's going after it, and why is he cowering with a baseball bat and a helmet on? Then it becomes about something. And the example I always give is if you look at Friends, the monkey goes missing, right? First season of Friends, Rachel accidentally lets the monkey go missing because there's a hot guy and there's, whatever else. And it's not about looking for a monkey. If that was a half hour where they just looked in places and had quips until they found it, nothing. But what's great about it is the following. Number one, Ross has never been angry with Rachel like this before. This is brand new character territory for them. So he's completely in love with her and furious with her. And him trying to balance those two things is great to watch. And so you watch him struggle with all of that. But in the end, he can't. His nature, because he's in a good sitcom character, his nature is to let it out rather than let it just fester and be quiet about it. So he starts going out and he starts calling her on her behaviour, right? This is because of you. You're self-centred. You don't think about other people. You're always in your own land doing your Rachel thing. Da, da, da. This is good. This is calling a character on what's wrong with it. And then it escalates because someone calls animal control. And you go, oh, well, I mean, that's just looking for it more, isn't it? That's just the same thing again. But it isn't, and it isn't because the animal control person turns up, and number one, they can't find the monkey, because if they do, they're going to take it away, because the monkey's here illegally. Yeah. So instead of helping the situation, now we've got stakes, because now we've got a real problem. At the halfway point, things escalate. We have to find the monkey now before someone else finds the monkey. So it's bigger, but also the alternative is, or maybe he'll get away. That would be okay too. That wouldn't be as good a solution, but at least it's not animal controlled, captured and shit like the thing. And the best part about it, the woman from Animal Control, she knows Rachel from high school. She met her at high school, she knew her at high school, and thought she was a bitch in high school. Oh, you were prim and pretty, and the thing, well, she's got a grudge against Rachel. We've been talking about what's wrong with Rachel for the first half of the story, and here's a character to personify all of that. What a brilliant second half. And it's still about looking for a monkey, but it's definitely not just about... And that's how you do it. That's how you build from a concept into a whole fully fledged story. That's the difference between, I've got an idea for a riff about looking for a monkey, and do you know how well we can interrogate the characters and escalate the situation while looking for a monkey?
What would you take from that, though, Andrew? Because in terms of writing, I know you're writing your own sitcoms and starting to get involved in all that. Would you, therefore, be of a mind now to think about, let's take that example, would you be now thinking the monkey comes first, or would you actually think, I want these guys to start falling out, let me think of a comedy way so basically character first or gag premise first?
I mean, I always say about one of the things they said very smartly about Buffy was that you don't come up with a monster and go, wouldn't it be cool if they met this kind of monster? What you go is, wouldn't it be great if Buffy had because Buffy's got this problem about her boyfriend's inability to talk to her, and he doesn't say all the things, and she doesn't know what he's thinking. Wouldn't it be great if she got psychic and knew what he was thinking? Yeah. And then you go, oh, wouldn't it be more interesting if she got the psychic power and hear what everyone else is thinking and still can't hear what he's thinking, because that's more frustrating and more interesting. That's the way round you have to work. Having said that, there's nothing to you can't stop which order ideas happen to you. If you come up with, well, I mean, the monkey could get loose. Well, okay. Well, that would be about their relationship then, wouldn't it? If it, whichever way round it happens, it's not that you shouldn't have the wacky idea first and then apply it. As long as you apply it, just don't make it the search for the monkey. Yeah,
I'm with you.
And I'll be very, very honest about it. It's much easier to learn these lessons as to teach these lessons as a script editor as it is to learn them as a writer. Yeah, I did Oh, this is a horrible confession, but I'll do this. Years and years ago, I wrote a pilot which sold to 2 different production companies. One did it, developed for a while, dropped it. Another took it on, blah, blah, blah. And it was called I'm Not With Him, and you can hear it because it's the audio of it is on my website still. Because what we ended up doing was, let's try this as an audio pilot. Let's just see if we can do it. Because I got so sick of endlessly developing it and not really doing anything. And it just felt kind of, let's kill it, but let's kill it really well by having a cool cast come in. And if we sell it, great. And if not, at least it was a good experience. Yeah. And I thought, and so I rewrote the script for radio. So it'd been through a few passes, and you think, well, this is in good nick. And the cast seemed to dig it, and it all seemed to work. And then just recently, I did, for the National Film and Television School, I went and did a couple of days of teaching script editing and this kind of business. And I said, all right, after the first session, I said, go away and listen to this half hour, and then you're going to give me notes next week. Now, I was hoping for... what I'd said was give me notes, but the chap who was running the course said, you know what, give him your candid notes. Don't give him the help him develop this notes. Give him the just what you think and what you'd tell him, say, even if he wasn't here. It's the most brutal hour of my life. It's a room of 20 students who don't have the filter, who don't worry about your ego. Now, if I was
Writing
20...
students?
Yeah. If I was 25, I'd have died. Yeah. I'd have gone home and killed myself. It was the most miserable thing.
Did they? And they did that in person?
And they did that all in person.
They didn't send you these notes?
And no. This was all in person. This was all to my face, and it was all it was stuff like, I don't get why you stopped when the episode stopped, because it seemed to me like everything was just escalating to an interesting third act. And I mean, they're right. That's a real problem. And this guy's behaviour's inconsistent because he really wants to do karaoke, but then he gets up there and he starts acting really terrified. It's like, massively inconsistent character behaviour. You've got 2 leads who have the same dialogue rhythm, and I know that's deliberate because it's about people who share a life having the same kind of rhythms and being too close. But isn't that anti-comedy to have 2 banjo acts next to each other? Yes, it absolutely is, and you shouldn't do that. It's a catalogue of stuff. And obviously, I mean, that was 2008. With a bit of luck, I've learnt a lot since I first wrote that, first put that all together. But it's so much easier to see it from the outside. I always say script editing is a reactive art. It's a thing where you send somebody a script, they read it, they can't help but have a response. Their natural instinct is to have an opinion as they're going through it. It's unstoppable. That's great. The writing thing is the blank page. That's harder. That forward momentum, making a thing, willing it into existence, is so much harder than reacting to something that already exists. Yeah. And actually, it's one of the things I'd like to apply to my writing more, is taking ideas, taking bits and pieces, taking those and having reactions to my own stuff. Graham's like that. When Graham rewrites, he's had notes, but it's almost like, one of the things I say about script editing is it's like you put your script in a drawer for a year, and then you got it back out. And what you would tell yourself with that much distance after you've gone through the heartache of, I poured my soul into getting this thing on paper in the first place. If you had a year for every draft, writers could, you could write one 6-part sitcom every 15, 16, 18 years. Yeah. And it'd be
really good, though.
And it would be really good, but you haven't got that kind of time. So that's one of the reasons you hire script editors, to give you that feedback quicker, is to get to that point faster. And one of the things Graham's really good at is reacting to his first drafts. And the rewrites are rewrites, they're restructures, reshapes, they're overhauls. But you can see we'd never have got to that without that first draft.
Of course,
and it is like somebody sent you 12 pieces of ideas in the post, and you went, what's the best way to put these together? And you found a new way, as opposed to having those ideas in the first place. Yeah. Trying to use that reactive skill as part of your writing process is something that I'm very keen to kind of do better with.
Well, Graham's on Twitter, obviously, Graham Linehan, and he posted a photo once of his writer's room for the IT crowd, which was just a blank writer's board. You know
what? It wasn't the IT crowd. It was Count Arthur.
Oh, it was Count Arthur. Yeah. Right. So it was even more recently than I imagined. And he showed a photograph of what it was like after your notes, and it was just like an explosion of ideas, and it really got them going. And I just thought that was a real cool thing to do. But also, I think I got to know you on Twitter, or started following you on Twitter before I met you in person. Yeah. I was going to bring up the notion of tweet notes, but is there something else on the top 5? Have we got to 5?
Go on. We got to sort of 4.5, didn't we? I'll tell you what. Here's a good one. Here's an slightly interesting one.
Final tip
is people who write sitcoms where all the characters get on. huge mistake. But here's the other half of that. People who write sitcoms where all the characters are always sarcastic to each other and none of them get on.
Yeah.
And it's this huge mistake. Somebody years and years and years and years ago said that comedy is conflict, that sitcom thrives on conflict, that comedy, and somehow everyone seems to have, not everyone, half of everyone has taken this to heart and gone, right, they must always be in conflict, so Basil's always mean to Manuel. No, they're not. Polly's kindness to Manuel is really important to that show. But here's the thing, the misunderstanding is this. Comedy, sitcom in particular, it doesn't thrive on conflict, it thrives on difference. The friends in Friends aren't in constant conflict. That show ran forever and is really, really good. I know I keep using Friends as an example.
That's a good example.
But it's important to recognise this. It's important to realise that the conflict thing is the result of difference. When Ross and Phoebe start arguing about evolution, that's conflict. But they were already different characters. They were already... And one of the examples I use a lot is actually from the IT crowd, and it's I think from series 1, and they have lunch. It's just the three main characters sat having lunch, and Jen has sushi, and it's own thing, and she's got the chopsticks, and it's the whole nut. And the other two are looking at her like it's space food, like, what the hell is the matter with you? And she's looking over at Roy, and he's having chicken in a bucket from an actual bucket. And it's gross and disgusting, and it's like that bit in Friends where Joey has the line where he says, "I'm just eating the skin, so the meat's going begging." You know, it's that kind of stuff. Okay, so he's that, and meanwhile Moss is sat there going, wondering if he had his yogurt first, would it blow everybody's minds? Because he's got a little packed lunch like he's still at school. It's such a clear delineation of character. One of the core things about sitcom actually is if you have one set of characters sit around and talk about one subject, you get to know who they all are really fast. There's nothing interesting about the friends in Friends all sitting around and agreeing that friendship's really important. We know that. That's the thing that makes them all work together. Oh, it's like doing a sitcom set in a legal firm and they all talk about, the law. You're not going to... But find the thing they disagree on. Find the clause that they disagree on. Find the aspect. This is why that 7 lines from Friends thing. It's because they're all talking about dating. And Joey's confident about dating, and Chandler's down on himself about it, and Monica's kind of mechanical and processy about it, and Phoebe's worried about, well, what if it's like that time when I dated that guy who ate chalk? You get character difference from providing that one central column to have them all dance around. And that tells you about why they all belong in a show together, because they're going to have different takes on a situation. Red Dwarf's great for that. Red Dwarf's terrific for that, because Lister is slobby but kind of humanitarian. Like his thing, he worries about other people. Rimmer's completely selfish, but he's incredibly regimented and tidy and organised and rule-driven, whereas Lister is all slobby, let it all hang out. Cat and Crichton, it's one of the interesting things about Red Dwarf, the way that Crichton wasn't in it for 2 seasons.
No, that's right. I remember when they found him,
And it becomes a thing where actually what they found was a really smart balance, because Cat is all ego. Cat is all selfishness and ego, and Crichton is all selflessness and guilt. That's a perfect balance. There's a Venn diagram of personality interactions for Red Dwarf. And it's why when you bring Kachansky in, it doesn't quite work, because she kind of rubs Crichton on the wrong way, but it's not really like... She and Lister basically share the same core values. He's just less tidy about it. And she likes fashion and clothes, which is, not the best writing of women ever, but whatever. But she likes fashion and clothes, and so does the cat. So it's like, actually, they have more in common than they have differences. She doesn't sit in the right... In some ways, you'd have rather they brought in... like Joe Brand as Kajansky, right? Somebody who they were a lot more uncomfortable with, someone who's too bolshy, someone who's too difficult. Because that's what Rimmer was that he'll talk over you. When Kachansky were like, well, you have your say, and then I'm going to tell you why you're wrong. There's something about that anyway. And it's I don't envy them that problem. That was Series 7 of Red Dwarf, and that was a tough thing. Because when you've got a show that's... when that 4-character connection thing is so perfect. You didn't plan it, but it ended up so perfect. To lose one of the big, huge sections of that and have to plug anything else in is a rough gig. And Femininity was you can see why that might have been a good idea, but it just doesn't play the same. It just doesn't work. These things are are a machine of moving parts.
Well,
that's good.
As I say, I got to see who you were on Twitter.
Sorry,
And you were doing these things called tweet notes.
Yes.
And I didn't know what they were. And then I started reading them, and I was like, who is this guy? Get over yourself. Get a blog.
That sounds like me. Yeah, that's...
Because I was thinking... Because what the tweet notes are, for people who don't know, Andrew's on Twitter as Ellardent, E-L-L-A-R-D-E-N-T.
I like it Ellardent. But nobody seems to get that. People think it stands for Ellard Entertainment, and it was supposed to be the word ardent, but with more Ellard in it. And
no,
I know.
Little rewrite needed on that.
It doesn't
give
play.
you some notes on that.
But the problem is, after this many years, I'm committed to it.
Yeah,
It's too late.
It's nice.
It's too late.
But you give your kind of Twitter bite-sized kind of flow of thoughts about something. And I was thinking, just get a blog. It's too difficult to scroll through it. But then I just got it.
Right.
You just, after reading one, you read the second one, you're like, all right, actually, it's fun to scroll through it. And your opinions were really insightful and really good. And so now it's become a thing for you now, hasn't it? It's like
somebody linked to one that I did on Reddit, and the Reddit community just went, God, I'm not reading that. It all breaks all the sentences up into these separate parts. But it's not that I don't write the tweets where the sentence goes across 6 tweets or anything like that. One of the why I don't blog is because I would fill up thousands of words. I wouldn't stop. And nobody wants to read that. Nobody wants to read that. Now, to be fair, get better at editing if you want to be that guy. And the problem is I don't want to be that guy, so why would I get better at editing myself that way? But what I would like to do is get those conversations started. And that's the other thing I like about Twitter. And it's kind of how Medium works in a way. You know how Medium lets you reply to a specific part of the article? Medium's like a Twitter relative.
Okay.
For blogging. And instead of just replying at the bottom, you reply at the side to the specific point that's being made. Okay, yeah. And I kind of love that. And that's kind of what my tweet notes...
Well, you would do, because it's almost like a script editing thing, isn't it?
Yeah, there is a bit of that. It's kind of like the tweet notes, though, in that you can talk about a specific thing, like why... Dark Knight Rises, right? One of the things I love about Dark Knight Rises, problematic movie though it sometimes is that if you look at the character of Blake, if you look at Joseph Gordon-Levitt's character through that, he keeps ending up in situations where he fails. He keeps he goes to investigate something and he ends up killing the 2 people he was investigating at the builder's yard. He tries to get kids over the bridge in a bus and they won't allow it and they force him back. And you suddenly realise all the way through the movie, everything that happens with him would have gone better if he was Batman. He wouldn't have shot 2 suspects because he wouldn't have been carrying a gun, because Batman doesn't do that. And there's no way that a bunch of cops on a bridge see Batman come across and he says, help me with this bus full of school children, and they go, no, I don't think so. Of course not. If Batman's asking you to do it, you'll do it. Everything in that movie was building to him being revealed as who... Sorry, spoiler alert, but was revealing him as Batman at the end, the new Batman at the end of the thing. And it's so beautifully done. Now, I'm talking about The Dark Knight Rises in tweet notes, in 24 tweet notes, going through, talking about different bits. I have 1 or 2 tweets about that specific John Blake thing. Is it John? Can't remember. And that means when people reply, they can reply just to that bit rather than to the whole article to talk about that one bit. It's specific, and I like that. It means that I have a kind of... Once I finish the tweet notes proper, there's a whole kind of hour afterwards where people responding to specific points and I respond to that. And you can look at those chains of conversations and I learn more about the movie and more about what I think about the movie.
It's a really good use of the format, actually. And then you put them all on Storify and then I put them all on, which is really great, so you can just browse them as if it was a blog almost.
Absolutely.
So that's really cool.
Absolutely.
So if you don't follow Andrew on Twitter already, I highly encourage you to do so.
I'll tell you what else, just from a working in telly point of view, is that that's kind of become my shop floor. Like I've had now half a dozen people in this year who have come through and said, could we get Andrew working on this thing? Because I read what he says about Doctor Who and he's so right, so we could benefit from that on our show when we're making it. And it's like having a shop floor. It's like having the flashy polished car in the front window.
Yeah.
You just go, just so you know, this is the kind of thing I do. And they get that it isn't tainted by opinion, that I don't just storm in and go, well, this wasn't any good, was it?
Moffat doesn't know what he's doing.
Yeah, that. God.
Yeah, but that's the trouble, isn't it? Because you are, in a way, trying to stand out in a format that where everybody's having a little... and having a little kind of weird little rant or whatever, when you're trying to do something a bit different, but it appears to,
I think you
to
said
the
you
common.
lose followers sometimes when you
Oh,
do
I
that.
absolutely
I'm
do.
sure you do.
Every time I do the
But probably
tweet,
just filling their timeline for like
time,
half a second.
absolutely. People get very, very. There is a small group of people who followed me because they found one lot of tweet notes interesting that they found on Storify, and I guess hadn't thought about how those happen in the first place. So the next time an episode of Doctor Who happens, and I flood your timeline with and I do apologise for flooding people's
No, you don't.
timelines,
You don't,
but
you're not apologising.
it's
an empty apology.
I am and I do, but it seems to work for me and for the people who follow me. And the other thing is, that's nice. That's Twitter. You opt in. You chose to hear from me. If I'm annoying you, if I'm flooding your timeline, it's fine to unfollow. I'm not going to feel bad about it.
true.
Do a search once in a while for the tweet notes hashtag if you want to go, as he said, because I'll look at the Storify when it's done. Bookmark my Storify page.
I rub my hands sometimes. It's like, I've seen that Doctor Who now, and I know Andrew done his tweet notes. I rub my hands with glee, going, I can check what he said
This
about
is
it.
because you do like always a bit of an insight, don't you?
Yeah, it's great.
And then you can't always think of them yourself. I mean, it's what Andrew does is very specific and singular, because quite often you'll have that gut instinct that you know something's not quite right and you can't put your finger on it.
Yeah. And even for the movies, as you say, you
Yeah.
do the odd movie or two. That's really good.
Yeah, I've done less of that this year, which I'm annoyed about. I'd like to get back on. I've just been busy, but
that's
that's
all right.
getting
We'll let you
married
off
for
with
you.
that. Oh, there you go.
Well, you've made this podcast a Christmas special. Thank you very much.
We're going to have to wrap it up now. 'cause
It's
the-
well over our normal.
yeah, and
hour.
the battery's running out.
But it hasn't felt like that at all because it's been amazing.
No, it's been a
thank
good
you.
chat.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, so thanks for your time, and anything people should be looking out for from you next. What's your next thing?
I'm doing a thing which is currently called Alt, but probably won't be called Alt by the time it gets to broadcast, which is for E4 and Mammoth Productions, which is a comedy sci-fi drama, which I hope will be... I'm script editing on it, which
Sounds
I
good.
hope
Ticks
will be...
Ticks a lot of boxes.
Will be very, very good indeed. And yeah, I'm hoping that, half of the things that I've got in dev will actually go beyond being in dev.
We all hope this.
Yes.
Yeah, fingers crossed.
All right, brilliant.
Thank you to Andrew Ellard. Thank you to Tim for all his equipment.
Thanks to Danny. Danny, give us people a roundup of the gump that goes at the end.
You can find us on Twitter and Facebook at UK Scriptwriters, and if you want to email us, it's ukscriptwriters@hotmail.com, and the podcast is ukscriptwriters.automatic.com.
Correct. Or search for us on iTunes and all your favourites.
Yeah, so thanks for listening, thanks for downloading, and we'll see you in 2015.
Yeah, see you then.
Bye.
Bye.